A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals, an oasis of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
I'm Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
Hello and welcome to the 18th edition of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, where newsmakers across the country and the world are speaking on the theme Defining a New Era. Starting on November 19th and going on to December 11th, we've brought you a stellar lineup of big newsmakers who have highlighted the agenda for this COVID and post-COVID era. When we talk about COVID management, one of the key areas has been the economy. So today's speaker, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's role has been key. Since March, the Finance Minister has announced 2 rounds of financial packages to help lift the economy that has been battered by the pandemic, whether it's the easier credit loans for small and medium enterprises or the free food grains to ensure that those that have been rendered jobless don't go hungry. And yet there have been critics pointing out that the financial relief doesn't compare with what economies across the world have done, that it needed to put cash into the hands of the poor, especially the migrants who we saw head back home from the cities. Now, the latest GDP figures show an improvement in India's state of affairs, but there is also the new crisis of farmers' agitation. So how does the government view the threat of mass agitation? Is the government happy with our growth trajectory, or does the finance ministry have a new plan? Also, with Bihar elections just done and a set of crucial elections now around the corner, how does economics reflect in the country's politics? The finance minister will be in conversation with Hindustan Times' editor-in-chief, Sukumar Ranganathan. Sukumar, it's over to you.
Thank you, Sunitra. And Mrs. Sitaraman, welcome to the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. We are delighted to have you here. I'm especially delighted because this is our third conversation or third interview in the last few months, and each one has happened in increasingly better circumstances. So I want to start on that happy note because I think there is a lot of positive data that is out there. The GDP numbers were a pleasant surprise. The contraction was actually much better than what anyone expected. PMI figures are still in expansion territory, which coming off the record highs that they were indicates that the mood remains optimistic. There are a lot of other high frequency indicators like auto sales that continue to do well. So I want to ask you, how do you feel about the economy right now? Do you think we are in a better place than we were 3-4 months ago?
Good evening to Sumar and to everybody else who are watching this. You line up a lot of eminent guests, and the conversation is very pithy and leads to a lot of thinking in the policy circles. And therefore, it's always a pleasure to be here because it both gives you ideas and also gives you a platform to be able to convey your thoughts. About my feeling on the economy, we are certainly in a different environment now compared to when I had given the budget. Budget time environment was itself different from what it was in July 2019. But unfortunately, post the budget in February 2020, not just India, globally, you saw unexplainable challenges, which every finance minister was facing with grit, trying to do the maximum best for their own economies. We did have what I would call a judicious mixture of fiscal and monetary, and to about 10% of the GDP is what we could extend till now. As I say always, I keep my mind open, keep the options open for intervention every time. But now I think we are getting too close to the budget. It's certainly now looking up in terms of recovery. I never would want to get into any of these alphabet jugglery, whether it is V, whether it is K, whether it is anything else. But every sector is showing clear indication that by some very pessimistic observers, recovery is there. Some would say patchy, but never mind. Recovery is consistently happening over the last 2 months.
A quick follow-up to that. There is a feeling in some quarters that much of what we are seeing is pent-up demand, which is coming into the market. Much of what we are seeing is festive demand. And now that the festive season is over and the pent-up demand is more or less extinguished, you will begin to see things starting to slow down again. What's your own view on this?
I'm not sure if just the pent-up demand and the festival demand will explain consistent more than 1 lakh collection in GST for 2 months. Yes, normally this is the season when festival demand always adds a bit more fervor to the demand which prevails through in a year. But I also see reports, and I'm also talking to many industry leaders who are looking at capacity expansion. Like, for instance, you hear core sector industries, be it cement, be it iron and steel, integrated plants which have had a certain level of capacity are all going in for expansion, more investment towards expanding capacity, not just in one unit, but across the country you're hearing of expansion. If that is the case, which also in a way gets reflected, expansion of capacity is one thing, and the prevailing demand has got itself indicated in the PMI manufacturing and also PMI in service. It is an indication that additional demand is what is coming in. And therefore, I think this is not something which is a pent-up or festival-driven demand. It is likely to sustain.
One of the things that we've noticed is that private investment is still weak. It's not picked up. And that puts a lot of pressure on the government to sort of boost the economy by spending more. Do you think that we have enough fiscal room to expand this?
But I would slightly question that assumption. And that is why I think it is important for us to recognize that many of the big industries who are in the core sectors are announcing expansion plans. That's not going to happen without additional investment coming from their side. And it's also getting reflected in the fact that banks are also seeing industry approach for additional expansion related funding requests. So I think that assumption may have held true in October, maybe not now. You are seeing expansion in capacities, and therefore that cannot be without investment from private sector.
It's still not shown up in credit though, but if what you're saying holds, then it will shortly show up.
That's right. We may have to wait for our assumption to be riveted with these two data to come. One thing is very clear, announcements by industry, but we can also wait for a month and see if credit is also equally expanding in those lines.
The RBI announced its monetary policy today, and as expected, there was no change. Clearly, the Reserve Bank is worried about inflation. I have two questions, so I'm going to break them up. How worried are you about inflation?
I'm actually not worried about inflation to the extent that there are seasonal ups and downs in prices, and the commodities about which we are seeing clear hike in their prices are largely seasonal. If you take the food grains and food edible commodities such as fruits and vegetables, also look at edible oils, there are seasonal fluctuations. And I'm also happy that the government through the interministerial group has been very frequently looking at the changes and taking conscious call to fill in any supply level shortages through imports, and also to make sure any logistical constraints which are adding to the supply difficulties are all getting sorted out. So with the intervention from the government periodically to meet any shortages in supply, I have a feeling this blip in the inflation, particularly of food items, will ease out. And therefore, I don't see this inflation, particularly on food items, continuing where it is. It will have to come down.
With RBI's lack of action today, the fact that it left things unchanged, does that put sort of, I know there is a certain secrecy that shrouds the entire budget making process, so I'm not going to ask you for specifics, but does it sort of put more pressure on you to do a far more growth-oriented budget? Because, if RBI had cut rates, it would have helped a little bit. But now your much of your budget is going to be set in a context where inflation is high. While what you're saying is true, a lot of it is food inflation, which will probably come down. and RBI has not taken any rate action. So does it put more pressure on you to deliver a more growth-oriented budget?
Well, I think it's always a careful balance between what the RBI does, taking into consideration monetary issues, and what we need to do even otherwise. I think the fiscal responsibility in terms of looking at ways in which stimulus can be provided, particularly at a time like this, will have to take definite importance. So there's no game saying that now that RBI and therefore no, it doesn't work that way. I think continuously it's a real-time balance that both RBI and the finance ministry will have to do. At no point in time any one would be left to deal it the way they want. It has to be a delicate, well-studied balance, particularly at a time when we are looking at reviving the economy at the earliest possible and giving it that momentum and sustaining that momentum. So these are not small black and white situations. They are issues where a lot of calibration and coordination with the RBI will have to be worked out, and we are continuously doing that.
Again, while I told you that I wouldn't get into the specifics, this is a question which is on top of everyone's mind. When next year's budget numbers are presented, one of the first things that everyone is going to look for is for the expenditure on the vaccine, because everyone is focused on that one thing, right? I mean, over the last 8 months, many of us have spoken of nothing but COVID and how it has changed things. Are you making a huge allowance for the vaccine in your budget?
At the moment, I can't even respond to it not because I'm talking about issues which will come in the budget, but matter of fact, as of today, we do not know what will be the details which come with the vaccine. Is it going to be 1 dose or 2 doses? Is it going to be 2 doses spaced, let us say, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in between, first dose and second dose? Are 2 doses going to be sufficient? Or is there a recurrent dose which had to be given after 6 months? Unless we get all these details, as much as how much is per dose going to cost, I really cannot even work towards a number. So about the vaccine itself, whichever gets cleared, and once it is cleared, I need to know cost per dose. I also need to know what will be the cycle in which, is it going to be one time, lifetime, or is it going to be 2 doses but repetitive? All these will have to be, worked out, and only then can I even think of a number.
Okay. Let's move to another area which has got a lot of media coverage over the last few months, which is GST. And I think the issue is by and large resolved with most of the states signing in. I think there's just one state which is holding out. Jharkhand is probably the only state which is yet to sign. And I'm going to ask a hypothetical question, which is, in hindsight, do you think the promise of 14% growth in state taxes, which was something that encouraged states to sign up, was always bound to run into trouble?
That we've, fallen short of collecting enough compensation. If economy as viewed in 16-17 had continued, this question wouldn't even be relevant. We are talking of 2 extraordinary years after the launch of GST. Immediately after that, all right, the 1 or 2 years went on all right. But the next 2 years, meaning the third and the fourth year, were extraordinary years. And not just the center, but states have also had various kinds of difficulties. And also, if you look at it, other than the COVID, other than economy slowing, issue of how frequently would you consider rate reduction or rate increase? Ideally, I've been, in a way, requesting that the council, if anything, should take a call that it doesn't, in every one of its sitting, it doesn't decide to change rates, because change it in to go up or change it to bring it down, it actually upsets the calculation of your revenue generation. As a result, states or the center planning saying that this year they would expect to have so much come from the GST are made to calculate and recalculate every 3 months after a GST council meeting. So if, like in the budget, taxation related issues, particularly rates, can be dealt with, accumulate it over the year and decide on it once, so that at least the next 12 months can go on a predictable course. So these are things which are germane to the fact of revenue generation and compensation collection. I'm sure the council wouldn't hesitate to discuss and understand and take a call on this matter.
This whole episode of GST, because it, like a lot of other issues, it got very, very politicized. What has it done to the GST Council itself? Because the GST Council was, it emerged as this symbol of all that was good and great with India's federal structure. Is there some fraying that's happened? Is it a little strange right now, or do you think things will get back to normal?
No, I would like you to repeat that sentence which you said. It is one of the best things for the Indian federal system. I think it's a very robust mechanism, and I truly appreciate every finance minister who come to represent their states for keeping that spirit up. There could be a lot of discussion. Some views may be different from the other views, but to be fair, everyone has spoken from the point of view of concerns freely being expressed and from the point of view of finding a solution. There has never been that kind of a bitterness which sometimes get captured outside, but not truly in the council. I still think the compensation cess related discussions taken on board, I would still say it is one of the best things for the Indian federal system, federal structure. There is a lot of engagement between center and state, very real-time engagement, and a lot of learning to take away from each GST council. And I good statesman. So I fully appreciate the GST council's vibrancy.
Coming to Reserve Bank of India again, one of their internal working groups put out a recommendation which said corporate promoted banks should be allowed. It's promoted a furious debate. I'm happy at one level because our editorial pages have had a series of very, very interesting columns with people arguing both for and against it, and some very interesting facets have come up. I know it's an RBI internal paper. Do you have a view on this?
Well, that it is an RBI internal paper. RBI itself probably has not taken a position, but these are not issues which are being discussed for the first time. The non-operative holding company idea has been long in the I wouldn't say works, it's been also taken on board. Subsequently, some NBFCs have been given banking permission. After all, one or two banks, I don't want to take any bank's name, private sector, NBFC, becoming banks, licensed, were all done during the last, let's say, 10 years. In the last 10 years, you've had private banks coming up. So these are not new discussions. These are not discussions which are happening only now. These are discussions not happening just under this governor. These are discussions which have happened under earlier governors also. And these are discussions which happened, and also decisions have been taken on it, based on it even earlier. So from my side, well, this is not the first time, and this is not a new idea. NBFCs in this country have been given, permission to become banks.
Agriculture reforms. When they came out, Again, there was debate about it, but by and large, I think the reception was positive. Because Indian agriculture is one of those areas which has needed reform for a long period of time. But the scale of protests, have they come as a surprise to you?
Well, one thing is clear. Under Prime Minister Modi, a lot of homework happens much before anything is taken as a final call. Consultations happen, consultations at various levels happen. I know the ministry, Agriculture Ministry and Farmers Welfare have gone through the process of talking to a lot of stakeholders, and only after that. And after all, these are things which have been in the discussion for a very long time. Political parties had put all these things in their election manifesto. Every party, in fact, had spoken about it. Maybe if you leave aside one or two which had questions about it, parties which are probably largely not in a big way represented in the Lok Sabha. But however, national parties, state level parties have all mentioned it at different times that these are reforms which are long awaited. Many parliamentary committees have also discussed some aspects. One has discussed on some and some others have discussed on some others. So it's not something which was just done in a jiffy. They've gone through the grind for quite some time, and these were of several parties. Well, if there are farmers who have some doubts and who would want to speak about it, I'm glad Agriculture Minister is sitting and engaging in meaningful conversation with them with an open mind. I'm sure something will come out of it.
There has been a strong demand from the farmers' side on writing MSP into a law. And from the economic point of view, the perils are very clear to some of us. It's potentially inflationary. Do you think that is an option that is off the table, or do you think the government could even consider doing that?
The negotiations are going on, so I'm not sure it will be good for me to comment on it at all, because MSP is something which, one thing for sure, between 2014 and 20, compared to a similar number of years previously, we have proven that we take MSP seriously. We procure under MSP much more than what the earlier governments have done. We've allotted and also directly given the farmers a lot more money under MSP than what was done before, paddy or wheat. Remember the speech which Prime Minister gave launching some of the infrastructure projects in his constituency in Kashi, only last week, I think, elaborates on how MSP has been used by this government to the benefit of the farmers. More money, more crop being procured only proves the intention of this government has been that MSP continues, APMCs continue, so doubts on those score need not be there.
One of the concerns that I think farmers have is from increasing corporate involvement. I personally think there is a lot of distrust that they have. How do you reconcile the roles of the state and the role of the market in agriculture? I think there's a fundamental problem that needs to be addressed there.
Fundamental problem, if you were to look at it, as the government should not be addressing it at all. But it is not a problem if you say government has to address issues related to very small holding farmers who will have to have the negotiating strength, and therefore the MSP comes up as a big support for them. They are at least sure that somewhere, someplace, they can at least sell their product for a certain minimum price, and that minimum support price is not decided by the whims and fancies of anybody. There is a committee on agriculture costs and prices. They taking the feedback from the ground, then decide on the costing, and then figures are arrived at. So I think there is no elementary contradiction between the corporate and the private, and the government intervention here. But the government intervention is so very important only to give that assurance for small farmers who will otherwise not have a buyer.
We've got a lot of audience questions. Some of them obviously want you to make predictions, so I think I will filter those questions out. But before I get to the questions from the people who are watching, why have you not pushed ahead with a more universal income transfer scheme? Because there's been one for farmers. Migrants haven't got an income transfer, but some sections. If you remember the first relief package that you offered for people with Jandan accounts, for women, there was a cash transfer that was made. But you have not, actually, I would go as far to say that there's been some hesitation in pushing ahead with that. Do you think you should have done that? Because a financial cushion through transfers will also boost demand, and one of the things that everyone wants at this time is more demand.
Yes, to have more demand is the need of the hour, well taken, but like so many different ideas which come speaking about how government effectively can put money in the hands of people, particularly the poor, there are so many different formulations which come. And we've heard many of them. And during the pandemic, it was thought, because I think the rough figure, subject to correction, about 30 crore people received cash transfers during that time. And that has been of, some help to them, maybe not sufficient, but some help. But the idea that you're saying as to why didn't you do it that way as a universal transfer of income is like the way many other suggestions have also come. I've not considered some of them. I didn't consider this. We'll have to see how best we can deal with this demand stimulus.
This is a question I've asked you every time we've met. How worried are you about the fiscal deficit? Because it's one number that many of the rating agencies look at, and it's usually a number that finance ministers are very worried about. Does this bother you?
I think fiscal deficit, I've had people tell me, forget the number, print notes. I've also had in the other extreme people tell me, yes, you may want to do spending, but it has to be with some kind of a multiplier effect. So please concentrate on just spending on capital expenditure. So yes, two extreme views have come, and spending on capital expenditure is not an extreme view to that sense because it has great multiplier effect. I'm not saying I'm taking that route only, but then the fact remains, this year, whether you go to this one extreme or whether you remain too very prudent, the fiscal deficit number is not what was said in the budget of February 2020. It is certainly going to be away from it. It's certainly going to be higher than that.
Which is true, right? I mean, you presented your budget in a world that was entirely different. I mean, it wasn't just in India which was different, but it was a world that was entirely different. I'm going to ask some questions from viewers. One of them asks a question that you've answered to some extent, but I'm going to ask you because it's a question that keeps coming up again and again. Saying that while you announced a program, some of the measures that of India's fiscal stimulus were long-term in nature and didn't really involve cash in hand for the middle class, which I think is it's a big problem for the middle class. Right? And the viewer asks, what were the reasons for this relative parsimony?
No, I can't. Medium and long term cannot be linked with anything. They have to be done irrespective of the fact that today we are in a pandemic situation or not. Those are medium and long-term steps will have to be taken, because if you give this excuse, now you're in a pandemic situation, so necessary structural reforms need not be undertaken, even that will not be right. And the will of the Prime Minister has always been that reforms should be a continuous process. I shouldn't halt it. In fact, the pandemic coming as a challenge should also be converted into an opportunity, and therefore we will go ahead with reforms is one thing. To link that with you've done that but you've not done anything for the middle class is also not right. So first of all, segregate the two. But even otherwise, I want to ask this question saying, if I've given incentives for people to, get interest subvention, does that not reach the middle class? If I've said that you can defer the payment in terms of GST or your income tax compliance and regulation related relaxations, which we've done now, are they not going to benefit the middle class? Interest on interest, wherein in the court I have gone to say, no, we shall pay up the interest on interest, it shall not be a burden on people, whether it is a credit card based money, whether it is anything that you bought, whether it is your regular EMI, these are benefits which are being given. Interest on interest is being paid by the government. Does that not reach the middle class? So I can go on like this. The EPFO money, of course it's their own money, but we've completely relaxed that regulation and said you may want to take that money now because you need money in your hand. That relaxation was done, and that's not for the middle class, is it? And again, now in the current one, I have said that even people who have been thrown out of jobs should be taken back, or they should be enrolled. If they are enrolled, the government will pay their PF for both the employer and the employee's contribution for the next 2 years. Is that not going to help the middle class? So I think if you want to put all these things which are spread over and across into the basket of middle class, you honestly will get something. May not be adequate enough to say, oh, I've given as much as they've asked, maybe not, but I have included. And it's only scattered across the board over different headings. And therefore to say that, no, you've not done it altogether, I want all this to be put into the middle class basket.
I think everyone was looking for a check in the mail, right? Because this crisis that we are facing now is not really an economic crisis. It's a health crisis. And you have this challenge of managing the economy through this health crisis. Sure, the Indian economy had some issues even before the crisis. It was decelerating, but what has happened, especially over the last 8-9 months, what has pretty much rendered a lot of the numbers, like you yourself said in budget that you presented last year, not particularly relevant, is this health crisis. And the solution to it is a health solution. It's a vaccine that's going to help everyone. And from what we can predict, and I know predictions are tough, but what we can predict, I think 2021-22 will largely be a year of vaccination in India, where in phases there are going to be various people who are going to get vaccinated, from the priority groups at the beginning to other groups. Given that, do you think the economic recovery next year is also going to be halting and that we should look at 2022-23 for a full-fledged recovery? Or do you think we will begin to see a proper recovery next year itself?
I think a recovery, as you may call it, proper recovery is possible from the next year itself, because why should the vaccine be seen as a deterrent? On the contrary, the vaccine coming brings in a certain positivity. Vaccine being very well efficiently delivered, for which all the mechanisms are being put in place now, will only bring in confidence among the people, in the sense both of workers, employers, and also of people who are otherwise engaged in some or the other economic activity. So they, I think, help mutually. A vaccine coming brings in optimism and positivity. With the vaccine, economic activity also will, gain traction. And I don't think they are mutually exclusive.
No, what I meant was that unless everyone is vaccinated, you can't really open up all your activities 100%. There will still be restrictions that happen.
Even with the vaccine, I think at least for some time, as I said, the dosage, the periodicity of the dosage, all still being not so very clear. I think for some time we'll still have to depend on what we know best now, given our situation. Whether that is the final word on it or not, I do not know. What we know now is mask, 2 gaj ki duri, and that will have to continue.
Sure. Last question. On a personal note, this has probably been a very tough year for you professionally. Hasn't it? I mean, it's not easy being the finance minister at a time when everyone's looking at you and saying, we are in crisis, you have to do something. What has worried you the most? What's given you the most strength? And if you were to look back at this period, how would you evaluate your own work?
What's given me the most strength is the fact that people of India, given all the challenges, given all the difficulties, given all the lockdown and everything else, have still just kept going. And today, that's the reason for the revival. I honestly do think whether it's the frontline workers, health workers, or anybody else who have been all out there, banks, I keep repeating, they were all there risking themselves. The policemen were there, army was at its job. All of us kept going, rural India. So everyone kept going without allowing this to really come down heavily on them. Those who were in the cities, locked down, went through a lot of suffering, went through a lot of difficulty. But today you see them all coming back. With whatever difficulty was still bogging them down, still they are all coming back. So to a large extent, people of India are the ones who are weathering it, also fighting it out and coming out. So I'll start with that. Other strength, of course, is and through the lockdown had been directly engaged with the states, also with the people. And therefore, that gives you immense strength that you're not alone sitting and hearing all these people and taking a call. Complete, backup with the Prime Minister. So I would think these are the two strengths which I've had.
What worried you the most in this period?
As to when this virus would go away, and the uncertainty which goes with it, and the talk about the second wave, talk about how many, can we bring the mortality rate down to below 1 and so on. So actually, the virus and virus-related matters were more of a worry rather than the economy.
Mr. Sitharaman, thank you very much. You've been very patient. You've answered all our questions. It's been a privilege, as always, to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sukumar, for bringing us that interview of the Finance Minister, Nirmala Sitharaman. We've just, of course, this is just the first session of today. The next speaker is someone who went into digital retail much, much before all of us started shopping online. So stay tuned for that interview that's coming up in just a bit.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals and oases of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush the truth. That's
When we speak of economy and the impact of COVID-19, one of the essential tools to help businesses survive is by shifting everything online. Our next speaker is someone who is a visionary because he founded the world's first lifestyle e-commerce destination long before the launch of Facebook, Instagram, and the iPhone. Federico Marchetti launched Yoox in the year 2000, but the real game changer came in 2015 with the merger of Yoox and Net-a-Porter, the world leader in online luxury fashion. The idea is simple: offering multi-brand online luxury stores. It seems to be a precursor to the time when that seems to be the only way to shop for anything. Looking forward to hearing from Federico Marchetti about the importance of fashion and luxury at a time when people are just trying to survive. Do we need to have beautiful clothes when we are just going to sit on Zoom meetings? What role do they play when a guiding philosophy right now is to just pare things down to the basics? He's been called the man who's put fashion on the net by New York Times. Now, before I hand over to Shireen Bhan of CNBC TV 18, who's in conversation with Federico Marchetti, let's take a look at his work with Prince Charles.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on this very special session at the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. Federico Marchetti, a pleasure speaking to you, albeit online. We would have liked to have you here in India. I believe you've never visited, so it would have been nice to have you here with us in India. But thanks very much for joining us. As Sunetra was pointing out in that introduction, you're a man ahead of the curve. You bought into the idea of bringing technology to the fashion world almost 2 decades ago. Even today, the fashion world is only grudgingly taken to technology. What made you want to bet on technology? You've been called the geek of chic. What made you the geek of chic?
Thank you, Shireen, for the question. It was 99, and I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So coming from, let's say, some experiences and after my MBA at Columbia University. And I thought that one day fashion was going to intercept technology and the internet especially, because those two worlds in 99, they were completely separate, but they needed someone, a kind of an interpreter or a link to bring them together, and that's what has been my role in the last 20 years. Basically, I've been trying to combine luxury with technology over the 20 years with many brands that have done their online debut with me and with my company, Yoox and Net-a-Porter and so on, and it's coming probably from the fact that let's say my inspiration, my philosophy has always been to find a good balance between a human and the machine. So which is not, let's say, given that luxury is an industry that is all about emotions, quality and beauty, while technology is all about process, data and speed. I think it's important to find a good balance between the two, because if you move too much into technology, then you can alienate the luxury shoppers. And if you are too much luxury without having any technology, maybe you're just missing the biggest trend ever in the fashion industry, which is the digitalization of it.
You know, I'll talk to you a little bit more in detail on the digitization attempts by the fashion industry. And I guess it's good reason that Forbes magazine calls you the data file. But let me ask you about this union that you speak of technology and luxury and what it means now in a post-pandemic world. You said in an interview that people love to shop in the old ways as much as they love to shop in the new ways. So, you know, for people who are at this point in time saying that, look, the way that we've shopped in malls and boutiques, that era is now over on account of what COVID has done to the business. Do you believe that we're writing premature obituaries? What do you believe the future of fashion could look like in a post-pandemic world?
We have seen a huge acceleration. So my company operates also the so-called online flagship store division, which is something which was an idea within the innovation of mine that came in 2005, so 15 years ago, when after launching Yoox, I thought that the brands wanted to have their own mono-brand shop. No? So Armani.com powered by Yoox Net-a-Porter, or Valentino.com powered by Yoox Net-a-Porter. And it was 15 years ago. So now we see with the pandemic a huge acceleration of this division, not only because some of the physical shops in some countries have been closed, but also because I think the digital shop, the quality, the service, the content, the entertainment of the digital shops have improved dramatically compared to 2000 when I came up with the first idea. And sometimes I have to say that the digital shops are even better than the physical shops. But this doesn't mean that the physical shops will disappear. I think, as I said before, I think that there will be a balance between going into physical shops or going into digital shops. And probably the holy grail and the final solution will be to integrate them perfectly. Yes. If you are a customer, you are a customer, the same customer that is buying online and is buying offline. And that's actually what we've been working on with Valentino, for example, since almost 4 years in the so-called project Next Era, because it's really the next era of retail, because basically it's a completely seamless integration between online and offline. So the two worlds will continue to coexist. So, because I think even if I'm a tech guy, even if I'm a digital guy, I'm still sometimes having pleasure in going to a physical shop, or I'm still having pleasure to listen to some vinyls, because sometimes the music is better on the vinyls than on Spotify. So I think that it's human nature. We will make some progress, and definitely the mix will change between digital and physical. So now the digital is still not the majority and will grow, but the physical shops will continue to exist.
Yes, so, since you're talking about this happy coexistence, I want to talk to you about what digital could mean now in terms of customer acquisition, in terms of customer engagement from a luxury brand perspective. And more importantly, how is digital driving decision-making? How is data driving decision-making, even from a design perspective? Are we seeing enough of that? Should we see more of that?
So that's, let's say, the project that I've recently launched with a lot of success with His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, called Modern Artisan. So the idea, everything started in Scotland when Prince Charles invited me over for a dinner, and he asked me to come up with an idea of a project to do together, Italy and Britain together. And so I went home and I started thinking which kind of project I could do with His Royal Highness. No, it was not an easy task, let's put it this way. And immediately came to my mind the fact that craftsmanship was definitely something that we both care, because in Scotland, I mean, the artisans are disappearing, no? In a way, it's an old job, an old tradition. Same story for Italy and probably also in India. I mean, you have a long tradition of craftsmanship. The second component of the project was about sustainability, because, I mean, Prince Charles has been a champion of sustainability since decades. I've been focusing on sustainability since 2009, so like, let's say, ahead of the curve of the fashion brands, thinking about making sustainable collections. And so that was definitely another important part of the project. And then the last part, which goes back to your question, was about data, because Prince Charles definitely has never been so much focused on technology. So that part was, let's say, the thing that I could contribute to the project. And my thinking was, if we were adding data and technology and digital to this collection, also in the creative process, not only we were inventing a new job, the one of the modern artisan, no? So also to attract the young generation to become artisans again, no? So to make it cooler, make it cool again in a way. And so to revive this old job through modern tools, but also through data and technology to make sure that this collection is fully sustainable at its heart. For example, by reducing the waste, because if you can meet the customer needs and the customer demand with the collection, it means that you create less waste. If you can have the right sizes through the use of algorithm or artificial intelligence, it means that you're going to have less waste. So not only through fabrics, materials, organic, the best cashmere from Scotland, the best silk from Lake Como. So not only through this, but also through technology, because my belief has always been that in order to become really more and more sustainable, you need to use technology. And you need to use the progress and the advancement coming from technology. And it proved to be like that, because in the end, the final result is this collection, fully sustainable, that has been created, powered by data. So 5 years of data of our company in terms of customer data, images. Imagine that now we have 36 million images that we have accumulated in terms of fashion in the last 20 years. So these young artisans, these young students, both from Scotland and Italy, they've been able to understand our customers buying their collection through this data during the process, which means that they've come up with a timeless collection because they've seen the long-term trends coming from our data. And so the camel coat for men, as well as the midi length for women, and so on. So that's the project about. And I believe that that's the next revolution for fashion. So 20 years ago, I came up with the idea of bringing fashion online. Now, 20 years later, my idea is through the use of data, I think that fashion can transform and become more and more sustainable.
Since you're talking about this this revolution that you hope the fashion world will see, and sustainability will become a part of decision making for every fashion house and every fashion brand, where are we on the scale today in terms of an inflection point from an industry perspective? I mean, you were a pioneer when it came to technology. You perhaps have been a pioneer when it comes to sustainability. But from an industry perspective, you know, we're so used to the idea of fast fashion. How do you slow it down? And are enough moves being made to do that? You know, I was looking at some data that you in fact put out, since we're talking about data. You said, do you know it takes 1,200 liters of water to make one single cotton sock? I didn't know that. I don't think most people know that. Is there a higher degree of consciousness today, not just with brands, but even with consumers? And how can brands help drive this consciousness?
Yes, the answer is yes. Thank goodness there is more and more consciousness about this issue from both brands and consumers. So, for example, during the recent Cyber Monday, we've seen a boom in sales for everything that is sustainable in our offer, both at Net-a-Porter and at YOOX. At Net-a-Porter is called Net Sustain, at YOOX is called Yuxigen, so two areas focus on sustainable fashion. And definitely, I think the pandemic has been an accelerator of this consciousness, as well as the digitalization of the brands, but also the sustainability part. Probably fashion has been a bit late in recognizing that, but definitely the fashion brands and the fashion creatives, the big fashion groups are definitely catching up.
You're saying that they're catching up. You know, you're working with many brands, of course, within your own group. You're also on the board of Armani, for instance. How are luxury fashion brands today looking at the idea of sustainability, looking at the idea of attracting younger customers, looking at deeper penetration into markets like India? China has emerged as one of the biggest luxury markets in the last few years. Do you believe that, you know, do you see India opening up perhaps as a big market as well?
I mean, we ship to India as one of our 180 markets. Definitely, there are still some barriers and constraints in terms of customs, in terms of time of delivery, and so on. So I think that the customer experience is not optimal yet. We're focused as a priority on China, because in 2018 I've done, together with Richmond and Mr. Rupert, the visionary entrepreneur behind our shareholder, we've done a joint venture with Alibaba in China. And I believe that India has a huge potential. So we still need to work on it, let's put it this way, as a priority for the group. But definitely never say never.
Never say never, and we have to get you to visit India before that. But
I can't wait to come to India. And my concept about India is that when I come, I would like to stay 3-4 weeks, because I have a feeling that India will be, let's say, very intense for me, and that I cannot stay for 3 days as I have my trips now. So I go to Hong Kong for 24 hours. India, I think, deserves a long time.
Yes.
And in 20 years, I never had 2-3 weeks together of holidays. So now that I'm chairman, maybe I will find the time to come to India. And
yes, now that no longer have CEO's role to have to look after, as chairman, you perhaps can take a little bit more time off for yourself. And yes, I assure you, India will require a lot more than 24 hours. You will not be able to capture it in even a few days. You will need a few weeks to be here. But since you were talking about emerging trends, digitization and sustainability, if these are some of the mega trends that the fashion industry is learning to work its way through, what else do you believe will be the drivers of growth and will be the drivers of change?
Yeah, another big trend that we've seen, which I'm very happy, to tell you the truth, and also goes back to your question about fast fashion. So my company, since 20 years, is at the opposite of fast fashion now, because it's like luxury is meant to last more than just one season. But recently, especially in the last 6 months, we've seen a big increase in everything that is timeless and investment pieces. So the brands that they're doing the best are those brands with the top quality, with the most luxurious touch in terms of fabrics, not necessarily the big logos, but the brands that and the items that people can wear from generation to generation, and not only from season to season, including jewelry, watches in this category. And is the same concept of the modern artisan, that is more contemporary than ever, because in the end, using data, what the students and the artisans have spotted are these long-term trends. And it's exactly what's going on in our current trading. So the brands that are focused on that are the ones most successful.
So not season to season, but generation to generation, hopefully. That's the way forward. That's the trend that you believe brands will need to focus much more on. Since we're talking about life in a pandemic, most of us, or at least a majority of people, have been stuck behind computer screens like this one that we're currently on Zoom calls of one kind or another. And we've seen a big surge or a big boom in leisure wear, in sweatpants going glam. What do you make of what you've seen as far as fashion is concerned in the last few months?
I promise that I'm wearing my full suit.
You'll have to stand up and twirl
during the conference. And I mean, definitely what you said is let's say is what's happening. But if I can add something, let's say, more curious, and probably that we haven't read everywhere, is about beauty. So beauty, for example, is a category that on Net-a-Porter is flying, probably during these COVID times, in the sense that people, they wanted to look good also on Zoom, and also male beauty and skincare is one of our hottest and highest growing category among our assortment. I have to say that to look good on videos and to look good on the Instagram, so this fashion to show rather than fashion to wear, is not such it's not something that is completely new, because also in the I was telling recently that also in the 18th century, people, they used to have paintings with the famous painters, and they were wearing the clothes just for that painting, and not to go out. So now, rather than painting, we have Instagram or we have Zoom, but in the end, it's the same story.
It is. Since you talked about Instagram, what has social media done to the fashion industry? What do you believe it can do for the fashion industry? How do you see this happy union, working in the future?
I mean, my friend Eva Chen, that she's the person responsible at Instagram of the fashion brands, and she's been sitting in our board for a long time, and she's such a smart woman. And that actually recently she just interviewed Obama in her Instagram, and it's so funny. She did a great job. We've done a lot of things together, also to convince brands to be launched on Instagram and to exploit, for example, the innovation of Instagram. For example, Net-a-Porter was one of the very first retailers online that was using the shopping feature on the Instagram. I believe that Instagram is in a way replacing more and more the print magazines. So for that, it has been definitely disruptive of the publishing industry. So people, they probably do search or look more at the Instagram rather than go to the newsstand and buy some publications that we all know and that have been very famous in the past, that now they've lost a little bit of their relevance.
Yeah. Well, speaking of relevance, how have you seen e-commerce change in the past 2 decades, since the time that you actually took fashion to, took the internet to fashion, or took fashion to the internet? Now, from a customer acquisition point of view, the touch and feel, more engagement, how do you believe things are changing in the online world when it comes to fashion brands?
I think that quality, when I started in 2000, there was the modem at 56K speed. So there was definitely a different time. Now we're talking about 5G, about high speed, and the quality has completely changed. And what we can do through the technology in terms of content and entertainment is really amazing. So for example, one of the features that is the most successful, for example, at YOOX, because for now it's only at YOOX and not at Net-a-Porter yet, is the so-called YOOX Mirror, where we're combining artificial intelligence with augmented reality, and basically customers can try on the clothes within the app of YOOX. And basically the usage has skyrocketed in the last couple of months when we launched the new version, simply because people, they wanted to have fun, and I think entertainment is part of our proposition. So we are not just a shopping site, we are a media in a way, no? So I always thought that we are an entertainer, so which is a mix between entertainer and e-tailer, and that's what in the end, that's what and actually after my Columbia Business School, I wanted to work as an entertainment company in movies production and so on. So in the end, that's more or less what I'm still doing.
So that's a nice term, an entertainer, and you believe that is going to be the future, combining entertainment and retail, because it gives you the flexibility to engage in a much more deeper and fun way, in a cool way with the customer. But how do you see?
I have trademarked this
term. You
have
trademarked entertainer. All right. So that's Federico Marchetti's trademark, entertainer. But let me ask you about the business side of things. What we have seen is a lot of large retail chains in trouble, either already filing for bankruptcy or on the verge of filing for bankruptcy. We're also seeing a lot of consolidation, perhaps inevitable, given the fact that there is a fair degree of pain in the business today. So what do you see on the business side of the fashion industry over the next few years?
Yeah, you're right. So I always start from the customer because I'm used to think about the customer first. Because also when I started, I invented YOOX as the shop of my dreams. And so I was the customer number one, and I still think as a customer more than as a CEO or in the future as a chairman. But you're right in terms of the business itself. I think that we are in a very fast-paced industry that requires a constant, continuous, and relentless evolution. So if I look at my 20 years career, basically every couple of years, the company that I'm running has changed skin completely now, because at first I started with Europe, and then I launched America, then Japan, and it became immediately international. Then I launched the online flagship store division with Armani.com and so on. Then I opened the Chinese market with JV with Alibaba. Then I did, so basically it's constantly changing. And so I think that the companies that they are in trouble are those ones that they've rejected this constant change. From technology, probably BlackBerry. I was using BlackBerry a lot, like in my, I don't know, when I was much younger.
I'm still using one. So clearly, I have to take a lesson from what you're saying.
And or other chains or department stores. So I think it's, you needed to change. You needed to evolve. You needed to basically try to anticipate the progress rather than following it. And that's what I've been trying to do over the last 20 years. Always to be the first and to arrive first. Even if you arrive first and if you are a pioneer, it means that sometimes you make also some mistakes because you are the first and you don't have anybody to copy. But I've never copied anybody because it's really so distant from my DNA to copy somebody that I love to be the first. And it's something that since I was a child, I always loved to be the first.
You know, you talked about being the first, and yes, there are many advantages to being the first mover. But let me ask you, recount for us some of the decisions that you took that perhaps didn't work out as well as you would have liked them to, and how did you deal with that? The big mistake.
I think that with innovation, there are definitely mistakes. So it's impossible to continue to innovate without making some mistakes, and to be tolerant also vis-a-vis the mistakes. So in our organization, the culture of tolerance vis-a-vis mistakes is very important if you continue to innovate and to evolve, as I just mentioned. An example, if you want an example, is I just mentioned about the YOOX mirror.
Yeah.
When we launched the YOOX mirror 2 years ago, it didn't work out because it was like with a few products, the people didn't look good on the YOOX mirror, and so it was easy to say, you know what, let's not do it anymore. But I insisted, I changed it, I insisted, I improved it, and now it's working fantastically well. So I think it's important to also not to give up on the innovative ideas that somebody can have.
Innovate and not give up on the dream that you have. Finally, let me end, Federico Marchetti, by asking you the brands that inspire you, and you can't name yours.
The brand that has inspired me, but I would say not because I'm sitting in the board, and not because I wanted to flatter anybody, but definitely Armani and Mr. Armani has been a source of inspiration for me, because it combines creativity with management and discipline, which so the brain left and right that we've been talking about for centuries, and there is the perfect combination of those two brains, and so therefore I'm super proud to sit on his board and try to help whenever and wherever is needed.
Federico Marchetti, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your life story as well as your insights on how you get the left and the right to join hands in a much more effective way to ensure not just the survival but the growth of the fashion world. And of course, sustainability will be key to that as well. Thanks very much, and we hope to see you in India the next time around.
Thank you, Shireen. It was a pleasure for me. Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you as well. Well, we are not done here on the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. We've got another very special guest joining us. We'll be joined by Dr. David A. Sinclair, Professor of Genetics at the Harvard Medical School. His 2019 book, Lifespan, was a New York Times bestseller. He's published over 200 scientific papers and is on the Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. He will be talking about the biology of aging in just a short while from now. Federico Marchetti, many thanks for joining us.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals and oases of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush. The truth, that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals and oases of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you, when you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है। क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush the truth that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals and oases of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic. The all-new i20. Born Magnetic.
ऋषि ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush the truth that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining. And in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof. To expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and the more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals, an oasis of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you, when you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic, the all-new i20, Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth.
Welcome back to our Leadership Summit of Hindustan Times. And for our final session this week, it's with Dr. David Sinclair. Dr. Sinclair's work revolves around one of those questions which humans through the ages have asked and whose answer remains forever elusive. How do you slow down the impact of time? He's the co-director of the Paul F. Glenn Center for Biology of Aging Research at Harvard Medical School. His work has focused on the role of protective enzymes called the sirtuins, which respond to exercise and caloric restriction. The Sinclair Lab was the first to identify some of the factors behind the regulation of lifespan. His 2019 book, Lifespan, was a New York Times bestseller, and he's been published over 200 scientific papers and is on Time Magazine's list of the 100 most influential people in the world. So if you want to know how to look younger, what are the secrets of anti-aging, without further ado, it's over to my colleague Sanchita Sharma, who is in conversation with Dr. David Sinclair.
Welcome to the session, Dr. Sinclair. It's been a very busy week for you. As we know, Dr. Sinclair was on the cover of Nature this week. Nature is one of the leading scientific journals in the world. And he was there for his seminal work that demonstrated that reversing the biological clock can restore vision in mice with age-related blindness. Now, this approach is going to have profound implications for other age-related diseases. And Dr. Sinclair is going to tell us more about it during the session. And apart from that, of course, he's going to talk about why we age and why we don't have to. Now, that's really interesting because none of us want to age anymore. And Dr. Sinclair has answered some of these questions in his best-selling book, Lifespan. But we're all going to go away with life hacks at the end of the session. So even if you've read the book, do stay around and listen to him. So I'm going to start by inviting Dr. Sinclair to make a presentation and talk about his several breakthroughs around aging. And at the end of it, we'll follow with questions. Dr. Sinclair, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me on today. Hopefully you can see some slides. I'm going to give a short presentation for the next half an hour or so, and then we're going to have some questions. I'm happy to answer those. So we all know what aging looks like. It's essentially our body deteriorates over time, leading to a variety of diseases. And we've been looking at aging for thousands of years, trying to understand, is there something we can do about this? Because the end of life, for many of us, is not a pleasant thing, and it's certainly not something you would want your children to have to worry about if you didn't have to. And so it's been my quest for the last 25 years, at least professionally, to try and understand the answers to some really big questions. Why do we age? Is there something we can do to slow it down? If you slow it down, will you live a longer and importantly healthier life? It's all about health. And finally, a question that we helped answer just yesterday, which we published in Nature magazine, which I'll talk about today, is aging even reversible? Now, it's a very important time for the entire planet to understand aging. And the reason is that in 2018, for the first time ever in our species history, the number of older people over 65 outnumbered the number of people who are less than 5 years old. And that trend will continue to go in that direction. And we're already seeing in many countries across the world that the burden, both socially and economically, of looking after older people who are no longer productive is an economic burden that is really crippling. And the older the population gets as a percentage, the harder it is for young people to be able to cope, to look after their grandparents and their parents. And so what we're trying to do in my lab, and I also speak on behalf of 100 or so labs around the world who do similar research, we're trying to understand, can we compress the last few years of life that are sick into a very short period? We've been working actually in animal studies in the lab for at least the last 20 years, showing that we can quite easily extend the lifespan of mice and rats and even dogs, and make them live healthier right up to the very end until they die quickly. So that's the goal. It's really not to keep us in nursing homes and being sick for longer. We're not extending old age. We're doing the opposite. Our goal is to extend youthfulness so that we can perhaps live to 90 or 100 and towards the very end still be productive members of society and playing whatever sport you want with your grandkids and great-grandkids. And this talk of living forever is really not something that I'm worried about or even working on. It's more about how do we address the problems that we face right now. And the money that we could save is in the trillions of dollars each year across the planet. In the US, it's estimated that just reducing one major disease by 10% would save in the coming decade at least $3 trillion. So this is real money that we could save that could be put to addressing other problems that we have, improving education, combating climate change, and other things. And in terms of population growth, most countries are already stabilizing in their population. And ultimately, the goal would be for population to stabilize and be replaced at normal levels. And you might be thinking, well, David, if you slow down aging, we're going to be overwhelmed with people. That's actually not the case. The number of older people is not that many if you do the math. So really, let's talk about medicine and what the future may look like in the near future. And also, as Shobhana said, I'll talk about what we can each do in our daily lives to give us the best possible healthy lifespan. So I work on aging, and the problem is that there are a lot of companies on the internet, a lot of people who really don't have a degree in this field who claim that they've quote unquote solved aging, drink this, eat this antioxidant. And the problem is that it's very hard to know what is real science and what isn't. And there's such a big difference between 99% of what is out there, which is mostly wrong or exaggerated greatly, versus what we do in my lab and my colleagues do, which is, as I mentioned, on the cover of leading scientific magazines. And there have even been 2 Nobel Prizes awarded for research that is relevant or based on aging studies. So let's talk about what actually is real and what might actually work, and cut through all of the other noise. So this is an interesting graph that I wanted to share with you. Often we think that we've reached our maximum lifespan as a society. This graph shows that that's not true. What is plotted here is the country with the maximum, the longest lifespan expectancy. Okay, so it started off, there was Australia in there, where I come from, for a while, but right now it's Japan who has the longest average lifespan. And what you can see with this graph is that over the 20th century and continuing to today, there's a very linear and predictable increase in human longevity. And every time these groups, which you can see on the right, have said that, okay, we've reached the maximum, we blow through that glass ceiling, and we keep adding years to life. But they're not all healthy years. We're very good at preventing heart disease. We can lower blood pressure. Cholesterol drugs have been largely successful. We have heart surgery. So we tend not to die as much as we used to from cardiac reasons, but the brain still ages at a normal rate, and we don't do much about that. And so what we're ending up with is an increase in dementia, and one of those is Alzheimer's disease. So our approach is to treat the entire body with medicines and lifestyles that will keep every part of the body healthier and more youthful. So today, most developed countries have a lifespan around mid-70s to 80, which is great. It's certainly better than it was 100 years ago, and none of us would go back to those days before antibiotics and average lifespan was 65, 70, and we would retire and die a few years later. We're on a path to having a couple of scenarios. One is that we'll live longer, but we'll still spend a large percentage of our life in decline and sick with many diseases and being frail. The other alternative, which is on the bottom here, if we're successful with this research, is that we will live longer and healthier, and that sick part of our lives will be much shorter. So whenever I talk to politicians or business leaders, or even people I meet, I won't say on the street because we're in a pandemic, but most people think of aging as something very different than cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's. But actually, that's not the case. Aging is nothing special. In fact, aging is by far the largest cause of all the diseases well, not all, but most of the major diseases on the planet. And because we've gotten rid of all the easy stuff, we've largely improved child survival. In middle age, we tend to do quite well, but it's the end of life where we haven't been successful. And as I mentioned, the main reason is that we've only been addressing one disease at a time. And to live substantially healthier and longer, you need to address aging itself, which drives these diseases. Just last year, the World Health Organization approved or announced that they would declare aging as a disease, a treatable medical condition. So why is that important? Well, one is that perhaps federal agencies, governments will change the law so that aging can be treated by your doctor. Right now, if there is a medicine, and we think that there might be some medicines already approved for other diseases that could lengthen lifespan, right now your doctor can, but typically does not prescribe these medicines for your long-term health unless you are already sick. An example of that drug is metformin, the frontline, often the first medicine to be given to a type 2 diabetic with high blood sugar. But there's a lot of evidence from looking at tens of thousands of people who have taken metformin that they also are protected against frailty, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease, among other things. But your doctor cannot typically prescribe metformin. Now, there are some countries where metformin is available over the counter, which I think is a good thing because it's a very safe drug. But here in the United States, for example, it's largely inaccessible unless you already have type 2 diabetes. The other reason for declaring aging a disease that's important is that it would lead to more investment in research and drug development to treat and prevent these diseases. I mean, if you are biologically 30, even though you have 50 birthday candles, you're much less likely to get cancer or die from a heart attack. And you might say, well, how would I know if I've got my 50th birthday, how old I am? I'll tell you in a minute that we can now very accurately measure within just less than 5% error how old you actually are, not by how many times the Earth has gone around the sun. So what I'm going to do in the next 20 minutes or so is tell you really what is going on during aging, we think. Can we slow it down? And can we reverse it? Now, about 10 years ago, well, 7, if you go by this paper I'm showing you the figure of, we as a field of aging researchers declared that we'd uncovered what we thought were the most important causes of aging itself. And there are about 8 or 9 of these things that happen to us as we get older. And hopefully you can read them, but there are things such as DNA damage, the loss of the ends of chromosomes here, called telomeres. There's deregulated nutrient sensing, so you get diabetes. Mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria are often referred to as the battery packs of our cells. They give us energy. Without mitochondria, we'd all be dead in about 30 seconds or less. It's like taking cyanide. Cellular senescence here showing with this leaf. Really what that means is that there are cells in our body that act like zombies, and the older we get, the more they accumulate in our body. And they seem to drive cancer as well as diabetes and other problems during aging. And there are a lot of scientists who are working on this in the hopes that one day we could kill those cells and so that the body could be healthier. Other things include stem cell exhaustion, and we lose the ability for parts of our body to communicate to each other. The brain is telling the body to be young, and some organs will, such as the liver, will also tell the rest of the body to be young, and we lose that communication as well. But what I want to talk about today is a new area that's, well, really emerging as a major cause of aging. And the reason it's exciting is that it seems like it could be reversible. And that's this one here in the darker green. It's written here as epigenetic alterations. Essentially, epigenetics is the description of how our body turns genes on and off. And for each cell, we need a different pattern of which of the 25,000 genes are switched on versus off. And what we find is in young people, cells are beautifully controlled. If the genes are a piano, they're being played perfectly in a concert. But as we get older, what we see is that the pianist is making mistakes and playing the wrong keys, and it's starting to sound like a terrible cacophony of sound. And if you're listening to this, you probably want to put your fingers in your ears. What we're looking at is trying to understand what drives that process, what makes the cell read the wrong genes as we get older. And is it possible to do a reset? Can you get the pianist to play the beautiful music of youth? And as you'll see, I think the answer might be yes. So this all started with what I call the information theory of aging. Essentially, when we're born, or even when we're fertilized as an egg and a sperm, there's information there. Now, there are 2 types of information in our bodies, primarily. One is the genetic information encoded by our DNA. We call this the genome, and we hear about it quite often in the news. And it's led to a revolution in biology. Of course, our ability to read the genome now is quite dramatic. A student in my lab could read your genome in just a couple of days. on a device that looks about that size. So we've gone from $1 billion to a couple of $100 to read a human genome. That's one type of information. The other type are the regulators of the DNA, the genetic regulators, what I was just describing, that make up the epigenome. And these are mostly proteins and chemical modifications of those proteins, and also chemical changes to the DNA. Now, these are very important because every cell essentially has the same DNA. So how do we have brain cells? How do we have skin cells? It's the epigenome, the pattern of which genes are on and off that determine which cells will become skin and which cells will become nerves. And that pattern has to be maintained in some people for over 100 years. The problem is it's not maintained perfectly. So a good analogy is a CD or a DVD for those under 20. I should explain, we used to use these to store music. They're a good analogy though, because the information that's on these discs lasts for many, many years, probably 100 years if you look after it. But these things used to get scratched pretty easily. And when they're scratched, the player would not work very well. And this is similar to what happens to our DNA. So the DNA would be the music, and the scratches would be the epigenome, the inability to read it. And the question that we've had is, how do these scratches occur? And can you polish those discs to get back the beautiful music? This is more similar to what's really going on. This is the nucleus of a cell on the left, a young cell. The genes are these red dots being read here. This is RNA coming out of the gene. And this line, these loops, are the chromosomes. And you can see some genes are on, the red dot, and some genes are kept off by bundling up the DNA in these protein bundles. We call this chromatin. What happens over time that we know for sure is that this beautiful pattern in a young cell that gives the cell identity and function will be lost over time, so that now the old cell is turning on genes that were once off, and vice versa. And these old cells do not function very well, and we think give rise to diseases. Wouldn't it be something if there was a memory of this pattern that could be reset, so that you could take a complex tissue such as the eye and reprogram it, press a reset switch to turn it into a young tissue again, so that it would heal and function as though it was young again and we were young again. Now, one of the things that we've discovered is DNA damage, and the process of repairing that damage drives this epigenetic change, this epigenetic noise, we can call it. And anyone who's spent a lot of time in the sun will know that DNA damage will cause aging. And we think this is the main reason, not so much the genetic changes, not so much the mutations, but actually the epigenetic changes, which is good news, because if we have lots of mutations in our cells and we lose the DNA sequence, the genetic information, it's extremely hard to restore that, to find it again. In fact, once you've lost all the copies of the genes, there are 2 copies in most cells, once you've lost that, you cannot get it back without very complicated technology. But if it's just the regulation of those genes, then you could imagine that you can reset it. So this is good news. So DNA, of course, isn't just flopping around our cells. It's 6 feet long in every cell. It needs to be packaged very tightly, but also very accurately. And this is nylon, but it's referring to DNA as this cord. And we have these proteins called histones that the DNA is wrapped up. And where it's wrapped up very tightly in these bundles, the genes are switched off. And when they loop out, those genes become accessible to proteins to read it, to read the gene. And that's how our cells control which genes are tightly bundled and off and which ones come on. And of course, these are happening all the time. Every time you have a memory or you eat a meal, the cells will respond and change which genes are on and off, but not so much as you might think. Because if you change the structure too much, the cell could become a cancer cell or it could become old. Mostly what happens is that these bundles stay the same for your whole life until you become old. And there are some processes that control that. One of these processes is called methylation. Methyl is just a type of chemical. It's a carbon atom with 3 hydrogens. And the cell attaches these methyl chemicals to the DNA and to these histone packing proteins. And that helps establish which genes will stay off and which will come on. Interestingly, these what are called methylation patterns, while they're beautifully arranged when we're young, they do change in predictable ways as we get older. And as I'll show you, we can use these patterns as a clock. So here's an example of that. Well, on the Y left axis is biological age in years, and on the bottom is the chronological age, so your birthday candles. And what the field has discovered, I need to give credit to my colleague Stephen Horvath. Sometimes we call this the Horvath clock. What we've seen is that these changes in these methyl groups on the DNA can be read by a student very quickly. Can take it's a couple of days to get the answer. Some people, typically those people who have bad genes or have not looked after their bodies, will be older than their actual chronological age. Some people will be average, and some people will actually be 10, 20 years younger than the average person at that same age. And it's known that those people who are younger biologically are healthier and longer lived than those who are already accelerated. So in other words, I could take a blood sample from you today, and then in a couple of days I could tell you when you're likely to die with quite high accuracy. Now that's important because first of all, it can tell you if you need to act and if you should really pay attention to your lifestyle or to your genes. But it also allows us to quickly establish if we can slow down or reverse the aging process, both in mice and in humans. And there's already some evidence that we can not just slow down this clock, but reverse it, both in mice, as I'll show you. And recently, Stephen Horvath published that he was able to give a cocktail of molecules to some people and reverse this clock by a little bit, just by 2 years. But it's a good starting point. So this is a very important development. We can accurately measure age. So what about reset? Wouldn't it be great if we could take a pill or have an injection that would remind our tissues and our organs how to be young again? Skin would heal, wrinkles could go away, and diseases might be reversed. This is the equivalent of polishing that disc so that we could get back the youthful information. So how could we possibly do this? Basically, what I'm saying is that there's a backup copy of the youthful epigenome in the body, and that we could perhaps use it to reset the cell. Now, we didn't know until, well, really just this year in our lab whether this was possible. But we were hoping it was possible based on a couple of observations. First of all, you can take a tadpole. Was it tadpole, or I think it was a tadpole cell, and put it into an egg of a frog and regenerate a new organism. John Gurdon discovered that and won the Nobel Prize for it. The other thing that we can do these days is clone animals. Dolly the sheep was the first, but now there are many different species that have been cloned, and they live, though you may not realize it, these animals live healthy, normal lifespans, even though Dolly was an aberration. What does that say? That says that probably there's a reset switch. You can start life from scratch. But can we do this in a living organism? Can we take a mouse and reset it? Can we take a human and reset the body to be young? That's what we're working on. The equivalent would be to take our DNA that's now lost all of its beautiful organization and put it back to this structure. So we started working on this really about 4 or 5 years ago, and we had a breakthrough in the last couple of years. A student of mine found a combination of genes that could actually do this. A combination of genes that are normally only switched on in very young embryos and babies. So I mentioned already that we can generate new life from nuclear cloning, and we can generate new animals. What we can also do is take adult cells and turn them into stem cells. This is called reprogramming. We also know that there are other species, such as this marine organism called Hydra, that can regenerate 2 individuals from one. There are some species, salamanders, axolotls. You can even cut the tip off a mouse's finger, it'll grow back. And in our bodies, if you cut out a large part of the liver, it will grow back. These are all signs that it's really possible to do amazing things with our cells in terms of aging and regeneration. So I mentioned John Gurdon won the Nobel Prize for his tadpole experiment. The man on the right, Shinya Yamanaka, a very famous professor from Japan, here having just won the Nobel Prize in Sweden, what he won the prize for was showing that you could take skin cells from adults, or really any cell type you wanted from an adult, and make it into what's called a pluripotent stem cell, a cell that could be turned into any other cell type, essentially erasing the cell's identity. So the cell was no longer a skin cell, it could become anything. And the way he did that was to take a normal cell, and in the dish, not in an animal, but in a dish, put in a combination of 4 genes that would normally be switched on in embryos, in eggs when they're fertilized. And he got these stem cells that now are used in medicine, put into people trying to improve the brain function and other organs. These genes encode what are called transcription factors, which are really just gene regulators that bind to genes and turn them on and off. So this was certainly worthy of a Nobel Prize, but the question that we had was, can you use some of these early young embryonic genes to reverse aging without causing them to become stem cells? The last thing we want is to create stem cells in the body, because if a cell doesn't have any identity, it'll be a tumor. It can grow. And in fact, if you turn on all 4 of these genes in a mouse, when it's older, it will develop cancer. And in some cases, will kill the animal, other labs have shown. So this was a very risky experiment. But what we did was we looked in cells at turning on some of these genes and found a unique combination that worked to reverse the age of cells halfway, but not all the way. The way we did this was we took a virus, not a dangerous virus. These are domesticated viruses that are used right now for gene therapy in people, for example, to repair genetic defects in the eye to restore their vision. And they're called AAVs. So we packaged up some genes into this AAV and tested if it could reverse the age of cells. Now we chose neurons, in this case in the back of the eye, of a mouse's eye. We wanted to see, could we make those nerves healthier? Now in a young mouse, these nerves will grow back. The video unfortunately is not playing, but this would be a nerve that grows in the dish. And this one doesn't grow. If you damage an adult nerve, it will not grow back. I think we all know that. If you damage your spine or you damage your optic nerve or your brain, it's not going to miraculously grow back. But it does if it's very young. So we thought if we could reprogram these nerves in the eye to be very young, we might get improved repair and maybe even vision back again from those mice. Now, this was an optic nerve where it was these nerves are not healthy. If they're healthy, they glow orange, but here you can see that most of these optic nerves in the mouse have died off. Now, if we apply 3 of the Yamanaka genes that I told you about, called O, S, and K, and we turn them on for 3 weeks, those nerves grow back. You can see a lot of them are preserved. The eye is here, the brain is on the left, and they grow back. This has really never been seen to this extent, and certainly not seen when the treatment was given after cells had already been damaged. And we call this epigenetic reprogramming. And these nerves, when they were damaged, they aged prematurely and died, perhaps of old age, within a matter of weeks. And here, these nerves were young again. So we can also test vision. In this experiment, we're testing glaucoma. You might have relatives who have glaucoma. It's pressure in the eye. It's one of the largest causes of blindness on the planet. And if you lose your vision because of pressure in the eye, you'll never get it back. There's nothing you can do except some medicines that slightly slow down the progression of the disease. But we asked if we have a mouse that has lost its vision from pressure, can we restore that vision? And we can test this a number of ways. We can look at electrical signals in the eye. But another way we do it is to look at vision. And here's an experiment where the mouse is looking at moving lines. The lines are moving like this. And if the mouse cannot see, it will just sit there. But if it can see, it will move its head like this. And we can track that with a camera. And this experiment here, we just need to focus on the red versus the blue. And what you can see is with our reprogramming, we get back the youth in the cells, and we also get back some vision that's been lost. So this is the first time that we've been able to, anyone's been able to restore vision in blind, or at least mice that have lost their vision. But then we did something interesting. We teamed up with another lab at Harvard that works on vision, and we took just regular old mice that were in the lab and living normally, and we put them in front of the screen. You can ignore, this is just the mouse being a bit nervous on the platform down here, but you can see that this mouse is not moving its head. This mouse cannot see because it's old. It's about 1 year old, and this type of mouse loses its vision rapidly due to old age. What we wanted to do was to deliver our 3-gene combination with the virus into the eye. It's very simple, actually. It's not difficult. Doctors do this all the time, give a single injection into people's eye who have, say, macular degeneration, and it's painless and it's very quick. We did the same for the mouse, didn't feel it, and 3 weeks later, after we turned on these epigenetic reprogramming factors, we got this result. We had old mice that could see. You can tell that this mouse is now able to see again. And in fact, these old mice, on average, could see just as well as the young mice could, which to me is really quite incredible that we can now restore vision in blind mice. My student at the time, Wan-Cheng Lu is his name. He's now a postdoctoral researcher, or a PhD, a doctor. He took the cells out of the back of the eye and measured whether they were younger. And in fact, it turns out that they were much younger based on this clock. And not only that, this symphony I was referring to, of which genes are played, it came back to be a beautiful, youthful symphony of genes. The genes that went off with aging came back on to the right level, and genes that went on during aging were shut off again. In other words, we had restored the nerve cells' identity. The nerve cells woke up from their sleep in the old mice to function as though they were young again. In fact, literally, they were young again. We actually know that this clock is important, or at least the methylation, those DNA changes are important, because if we block the eye from removing those chemicals, the vision was not restored. So this clock that I'm telling you about, those chemicals seem to be important for the aging process and the reset switch, which we didn't know until we discovered this recently. One way to think of this actually is, so if you have a clock on the wall, if you turn the hands of the clock backwards, nothing's going to change because the clock is just a clock. But what this experiment is telling us is that this is a very special clock. If you move the hands backward, time goes backward, age goes backwards. Yeah, so I just want to talk a little bit about what we can do in our daily lives to give ourselves the maximum possible health in old age. And we know that how we live our lives has a big impact on us. In fact, most of our longevity and health, 80% in fact, is determined by our epigenome, not by our DNA. And we can change our epigenome by how we live. So what can you do now? Well, if you're getting sufficient food, if you're eating 3 regular meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or even eating snacks in between, we know that that's not going to give the best chance of longevity. And certainly overeating will be even worse. So what I do is I like to skip at least 1 meal a day. We have enough food in our household, and our meals tend to be large to begin with. And I try not to snack. I like to have tea and coffee if I get a little bit hungry, and you do get used to it. Now, you may not want to skip breakfast. You may want to skip lunch. You may want to skip dinner. It's different for every individual. I also just want to point out that if you're young, if you're a teenager or in your 20s, this probably isn't for you. I'm talking more about people who are middle-aged, whose metabolism has slowed down, and we certainly don't want to suggest malnutrition or starvation as any way to improve health. That's the last thing that we want to talk about or hint that could be helpful. This is more about being, at least some part of the day, a little bit hungry. And we've known this for thousands of years, that this actually is helpful. What we didn't realize was that what happens when you're hungry is that these longevity defenses, these longevity factors that I'm describing to you and others get turned on. If we sit around all day, if we are always eating or not feeling hungry, our bodies will relax and they won't fight aging. So this is one way to turn on those defenses against aging. Do a bit of exercise, lose your breath a few times a week if you can. If you don't move, get up, walk at least. Do some weightlifting as well. Once a week at least I try to lift something. I do some wrestling with our son as well. That helps. I talk about hip hinge exercise. This is bending your hips and lifting weights. It's very important to particularly keep your hips strong from walking and bending, because just in the US, every 19 seconds somebody falls over and breaks a bone. And this is just as bad as getting cancer in terms of survival. You might want to talk to your doctor and get tested to see what's working in your body and try to counteract that. You can also have devices on your wrist that can tell you how you're doing. And I do that because, I don't take blood tests a lot, but I do try to monitor to see how I'm doing, to see if things are working. Sleep well, reduce stress. This is all important stuff. Sleep is actually intimately tied to these longevity genes that control the pace of aging. And here's one you may not have heard. You want to eat plants that have been stressed. What do I mean by that? Well, red wine is an example of a foodstuff that's made from grapes that have been stressed. You probably want to eat plants that have been grown outdoors or dehydrated. And farmers actually know that if you stress plants before picking, such as orange trees, you can put a nail into the stem and it will produce better fruit The reason is that plants produce their own molecules to improve survival and longevity. And we believe, and we've got a lot of evidence, that when you eat those molecules from the food, you mimic exercise and you mimic fasting and hunger. We call this xenohormesis. So I've given you a lot to think about today. You can read about the new discovery online at nature.com. It's out there right now. I've tweeted about it. There's a free copy if you want to download it, if you don't have a subscription to Nature magazine. And in my book, Lifespan, I talk about not just why we age, but what we can do about it in much more detail than I've told you about today, including what I do and my family does. And my father is 81 years old with no diseases, in perfect health, and he's literally stronger and fitter and arguably happier than I am. So it's not a clinical trial, but he is a beacon of hope for all of us. And I want to end there. We can now take questions, and thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair. And I want to start by asking you, are we likely to get a pill or a vaccine that can actually reverse aging in our lifetime? When I say lifetime, I mean the next 20 to 30 years?
Well, I certainly hope so. I don't have a crystal ball, but we are working here in Boston on taking this reprogramming technology, the one that I showed for today for the eye. And in the next 2 years, we hope to treat the first patient with glaucoma to see if we can restore vision. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just one example of at least 20 companies that are working on medicines that should, if it all works out, slow and perhaps even reverse aging. So if it doesn't happen in the next 30 years, something must have gone terribly wrong.
Right, and this epigenetic programming that you talked about, how often can it be done? Can it just be done once in your lifetime, or can you do it repeatedly?
Yeah, that's the big question that we're working on. We've only done it once, but maybe you can do it 10 times, maybe 100. This is a really interesting question. I think that we can do it multiple times. There's no reason why I could think that it couldn't be done repeatedly. So just, imagine with me for a second that we could find a pill or a gene therapy, a virus that would do what we did to the mouse's eye, but throughout the whole body. And we've engineered this already to be turned on with a pill. We use a molecule in those mice called doxycycline, which is just an antibiotic. It's not the fact that it's an antibiotic that's important. It's just a molecule that we can give to the mice as a drink, and it turns on the genes. So one day, maybe you go to your doctor, you have an injection, and you get a pill for 3 weeks. You get rejuvenated throughout your body. You get better memory, better eyesight, better healing, maybe even look better. And then 10 years later, you come back and have another course of that drug for 3 weeks.
But
and then you just keep repeating it. Yeah, right.
So this epigenetic, again, resets, can they be used to treat diseases other than glaucoma? I mean, what would you think? What are the projections? What is the potential? Yeah, some other colleagues in my field have shown that you can reverse aging in the brain. Mm-hmm. And my lab is now working on this. We're actually growing little brains in the lab. You can grow mini brains now from cells from people. These are reprogrammed cells. We're not taking brains out of people, but we're actually now looking at reversing the age of the brain. Perhaps we can treat Alzheimer's and dementias that way. Mm-hmm. But they've also shown internal organs can be reversed. The kidney, the pancreas. I mean, ultimately, any part of the body, we think, theoretically could be reversed. Even joints. Joint pain is a big problem, and maybe we could get those joints to heal and regrow like young ones. You mentioned in your presentation that there's a lot of dubious science that is there on the internet. So there's just so much information you don't know. So what does real science say about supplements? Which are the supplements that work and which are the supplements that don't? What would you recommend? Oh, gee. Well, I'm not allowed to recommend anything because I'm okay. What do you take yourself? Yeah. Well, I've always tried to be honest about this.
there are a lot of supplements that have not been shown to do anything in people. They might have been shown in a mouse to do something. Doesn't mean they don't do anything, but often there are claims on the internet that they do, or at least that they claim to work, but they don't. Well, first of all, what I would say is to go with a company that has good reputation if you want to choose a supplement. There's a term, at least in the US, I'm not sure globally, it's called GMP, stands for Good Manufacturing Practices. Yep. And that's good. That at least means that they're following guidelines that are set out by governments to produce good product. Go for the very pure molecules. The ones, often supplements are 50% this, 10% that. I prefer to get the 98% or more pure supplements. We worked on resveratrol many years ago, the molecules from red wine, resveratrol it's called. There are some pure versions of that you can buy over the counter or on the internet. I've been taking resveratrol for, I think 15 years now. I'm still doing okay. There have been clinical trials, some that showed no effect, some that showed positive effects. It depends on how it's delivered. If you take it, you'd want to eat it with some food or some yogurt, for example, to get it to absorb. So resveratrol is one. There's also something else in the body called NAD, capital NAD, which is a molecule that we need for life. Without it, we'd be dead very quickly. And as we get older, what we see is that our bodies make less NAD. And there are supplements you can obtain in pure form that are thought to raise up the levels of NAD. Now, we don't have a lot of information on that in humans yet. There are a couple of studies that have shown that they appear to be safe, at least so far, and that there's a disease called ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a neurological disease where the patients did better with the NAD boosting molecules. But it's early days for that. In general, there are things you can do. There's vitamin D, which of course is very helpful, and some other supplements for vitamin deficiencies. But other than that, the really big ones are the meals and the exercise that, until we have these medicines, seem to be the best bet.
So would you recommend a low-carb vegetarian diet, or do you eat meat? What is the recommendation? Indians are largely vegetarians, so...
Yeah, it's great. Over here in the US, there's way too much meat. And there are also...
We have everything deep fried, so that doesn't help, but anyway.
All right, well, that's not great, but there's also this carnivore movement over in the US where the people are promoting just almost pure meat diets. There's not a lot of evidence that high levels of meat will be good for you long term. In the short term, yeah, sure, you might build up a bit more muscle, but long term, definitely vegetarian diets are the way to go. I personally eat a fairly healthy, regular Western diet, so there's unfortunately meat in a lot of the meals that we have as a family. Of course, our kids need meat to grow. But yeah, I try to focus on salads and vegetables as much as I can. So you do want your diet to look more like what a rabbit would eat rather than a lion.
Right, I'm getting lots of questions. There's a question from Ananya who wants to know what are the coolest, most interesting anti-aging tools or technology or recent discoveries that are out there right now? Yeah, well, I'm excited about reprogramming to be able to reset the body, which obviously that's on the cutting edge. But there's also other technologies which are exciting. One is the ability to turn on the body's natural defenses against aging. So there are the sirtuins that I work on. You kindly mentioned them earlier. We have 7 sirtuins in the body. They're found in most of our cells, and they need this molecule NAD. So the ability to turn on those sirtuins is an exciting area. Resveratrol seems to do that. NAD boosters seem to do that. So that's one area.
The other area are called senolytics. These are drugs or molecules in development that kill off those senescent cells that I talked about earlier, those zombie cells that accumulate and seem to contribute to aging and to cancer. So that's a super exciting, relatively new area as well. And then lastly, a new area that's pretty exciting is to take drugs that are already available, such as metformin. And there's another one that's not as safe called rapamycin that's used for immune suppression. That seems to do wonderful things to mice, and in looking at people also seem to have effects on age slowing and even reversal. So that's also promising. When you ask me how soon till we have a drug for aging, it's possible that we already have one or two available. We just need to have more evidence that they actually work the way we're hoping.
We use a combination of drugs that can probably work together to address different aspects of aging. I have a question from Aman, who says, in your book you state that there's no biological law that says we must age. What do you mean by that? I mean, all of us grew up, being told aging is inevitable and we'll all grow old. So you're challenging that.
Well, yeah, why should we just say something's inevitable? 100 years ago, dying from cancer was inevitable if you had a tumor. There's very little you could do. And we decided we're going to fight against cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's disease. So why is aging, which is the driver of most of these diseases, why is aging something that we should accept? It's the opposite, because it's a common thing. And just because something's natural doesn't mean we should accept it. There's nothing about the natural world that we accept that we accept. We've been, ever since we picked up a rock as a tool and lit a fire to cook food, we essentially have been changing the world around us, and aging should be no exception. Now, I agree with you that aging is going to happen. We're not going to live forever, but can we and should we try to live another 5 or 10 or 20 years longer healthily? Absolutely. The same way we did this for lifespan in the 20th century. How long could we live? Well, there are species on our planet that live for thousands of years. There are even mammals, whales, that can live hundreds of years. So it's doable. There's no law that says that we couldn't live longer, and we're finally being able to understand how these other animals are able to live so much longer than we can.
It's like what you said earlier, it's not just about living longer, it's also about living a healthy life, because increasingly we have several studies that have shown that though people are living longer, they are disabled, and it's not healthy life that they are spending the additional 20 to 30 years. So I have a question from Deepika, who wants to know, when would one start with anti-aging intervention? Is there an optional age at which one should begin? So of course this is intrinsic and extrinsic, so both.
Well, so I'm extrapolating from the hundreds of animal studies that have been done, everything from fruit flies to little worms, mice, even dogs, and some monkey studies. So we have a big database to pull information, but we don't know about humans. I would say that, in my scientific opinion, around the age of 30, aging starts to kick in and actually make your system not work very well. You start to slow down with healing in sports. So I myself started taking resveratrol when I was 34, and I'm still doing okay. I'm still alive. Doesn't seem to be hurting, and it's not very expensive. So the trade-off is such that in my 30s it was worth trying, and certainly now that I'm in my 50s, it's definitely worth trying something. Think about this. We know what's going to happen to all of us if we don't do anything. So as long as it's safe and it's not going to break your budget, I think, especially the older you get, the more worth it is to try some things. But it's all individual. I would say if you're in your 20s or teens, there's very little reason to do things other than eat healthy and exercise.
But would
that's best advice.
Would a couple of glasses of wine work as well as a
that's debated. I think any doctor would say in moderation, a glass a day of red wine will probably do you some good. You don't want to overdo it, of course. Alcohol will wreck your liver long term. But there are many healthy molecules in red wine. Resveratrol is one, but there are many others from the grapes that are preserved in the wine. And I think that's one of the main reasons that red wine is actually so healthy. But how long do you have to take or drink red wine to have an effect? Probably a decade or so would be a minimum. The reason is that red wine doesn't have much resveratrol in it, maybe a milligram. And in our studies, we give the mice the equivalent of 100 to 200 glasses a day of resveratrol.
You're very drunk.
So yeah, fortunately, it's in a pill or in their food. But yeah, I don't recommend drinking that much red wine.
I have a question from Jaswant, who wants to know what exactly is the information theory of aging. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so this is the theory that's largely come out of my lab, and that is that we lose both genetic and epigenetic information in the form of DNA and the three-dimensional structures of the DNA, the genome and the epigenome. And if any of you are into information, whether it's computer information or radio signals or photographs, you know that digital information is the best form of information storage. And DNA, the genome, is digital. Instead of ones and zeros, it's A, C, T, G, the chemicals that make up the DNA code. And for that reason, DNA is very stable and robust. You can boil DNA in the lab and it's fine. And mostly our genome is intact, even when we're 70 or 80. But the epigenome is not digital, it's analog. It's as the equivalent of a cassette tape, and it will degrade over time. And it's the loss of the analog information, the epigenetic information, that we believe and are showing in papers like this one that we published yesterday in Nature, that it's the epigenetic information loss that is a major cause of aging.
Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time. The future looks very young thanks to scientists like you. And thank you for joining us. Over to you, Sunetra.
And one of the takeaways for me is the fact that, well, that was such a great session, because one of the takeaways is the fact that Dr. Sinclair talking about the fact that we don't need 3 meals, especially as you start getting older. So major takeaways there, and that's one really to go back and watch again on video just to take away some of those cues. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Hindustan Times Leadership Summit. Next week is going to be our final week on Thursday and Friday, when we have other newsmakers coming up. There's of course Nick and Priyanka Chopra Jonas, who will be one of our speakers. And also in the political session, we have Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan. So don't forget to join us then on Thursday at 6 o'clock. See you then.
A vision becomes a milestone when it helps make our lives richer with love and laughter. When it helps make a cleaner, smarter, and a more beautiful planet. So that you can set off on joyous new journeys and adventures. Building stronger bonds and bridging impossible distances, which take you from the ever new to the forever beautiful. Opening up vistas and windows to a vibrant new world. A vision becomes a milestone when it touches millions of lives. Aditya Birla Group. Big in your life.
Amongst the fastest developing states in India, a treasure trove of minerals and oases of nature's bounty, powering India's growth, adding steel to its streams. A leader in cleanliness, virgin in its beauty, vibrant in its culture, a land of promise, a land of opportunities. A state like none other, Chhattisgarh.
Thank you, Sonal. Amme, this Sonal. Thank you, Sonal.
Why is everyone thanking me?
I'll tell you. When you buy an Usha sewing machine, more than 1% of the proceeds go towards empowering women in rural India through Usha Silai schools. That's why.
You have 10 minutes or I'm gone.
I'll take a lot less.
Send in the drones.
Show maps.
It seems like everybody wants you.
And Born Magnetic, the all-new i20, Born Magnetic.
ऋषि, ये पंडित जी क्या बोल रहे हैं?
कह रहे हैं कि मुझे तुम्हें जिंदगी के सभी खतरों से बचाना है।
फिर तो मेरी लाइफ खतरे में है, क्योंकि जो कॉकरोच से डर जाए वो मेरी क्या रक्षा करेगा?
वेल, कॉकरोच छोड़कर तुम्हारी पूरी लाइफ एकदम सिक्योर है।
स्मार्ट लोगों की क्लियर है प्रायोरिटी, बाकी सब बाद में। फॉरएवर वाले रिलेशनशिप से पहले LIC।
In India, I learned that you don't add masala just to the food. You add it to everything you do. I learned that flavour is more than a taste. It's a sight, it's a sound, it's a science. In India, I found the secret masala spices that make all the difference. The joy with which you cook, the love with which you serve.
Incredible India.
It's a human thing to want the truth. It doesn't matter if you're older or part of the youth. We certainly don't like being kept in the dark between all those lies and those question marks. But lately, it doesn't seem to bother us when they bend and break and twist and crush the truth that's supposed to matter so much. In the race to be the first who breaks the news, they seem to have broken the news. And do you even remember the time when the news was supposed to make you wise? And now you can spend hours consuming and listening them shouting and complaining, and in the end, just feeling worse off than you did in the beginning. Which begs the question, does all of this not trouble our generation? When they push opinions and call them facts as we watch the fourth pillar crumble and collapse. It is a human thing to want the truth and to make every claim carry its burden of proof, to expect that the first voice you hear is also the last word that's there.
Meet the all-new Hindustan Times. Now experience, engage and express. Hindustan Times. First voice, last word.